All right, this is the one that I think that'll get you on.
Oh no.
What is the name of the haunted inn in Ty West's
Oh.
The Innkeepers?
Oh,
I know, right? I argue for this movie so much.
The Pink Flamingo? no, I think that's the inn in Home Alone 2.
Well, hey there. Thanks for stopping in to Night Shift Video. My name is James, and tonight I am joined by this guy.
I'm Cody.
And tonight is this is a weird Wednesday episode.
Woo, woo.
So
I don't know where I was.
I think that I've finally settled upon a good release schedule
Cool.
for the remainder of the season.
I like it.
You know, we tried doing daily at the beginning of the season.
Yep.
And it was fun, but it was a lot.
It's a lot.
And I think it was a lot for us, and I think it was a lot for our listeners.
Yeah.
So I actually have noticed our statistic numbers have gone up a little bit over the past couple weeks, and it's actually people who are like finally getting caught up from when we were daily,
Just like shoving it.
because
Like, hold on.
it's not just the new episodes that are
Yeah.
getting played. Like I'm seeing a bunch of old episodes that are getting played.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So people are finally getting caught up, and maybe we'll be at a much more healthy schedule. So it just made more sense to me. Scary Movie Monday.
Yep.
So on Mondays you get one of our scary movie episodes.
Love it.
On Wednesdays you get a Weird Wednesday,
Love it.
which we could be talking about a lot of different things.
It could get weird.
It always gets weird.
It gets a little
I'm
weird.
actually I already got I want to make a t-shirt.
Weird Wednesday?
I want to make a Weird Wednesday t-shirt.
Okay.
But I have to figure out the right way to word it. If you're listening, tell me what you think. So I want to do like a pun off of Mean Girls, because that's what we do around here.
Dude.
Because on Wednesdays we wear pink.
Oh!
So I want to make a shirt that says like
On Wednesdays we get weird.
on Wednesdays we get weird, or Wednesdays we wear weird, or on Wednesdays we weird out, something like that. You know,
It can't be well weird. I would have a
on Wednesdays we wear wheels.
I went through it. Oh, so, yeah, you can't do that because I would struggle with that. Like, my kids already make fun of like how I talk. When I say my kids, I mean my students. If you're a first time listener, I'm a teacher, so they would already make fun of me. So like,
On Wednesdays we wear wheels.
and I like it. So actually, this is we're getting weird here. I love Mean Girls. It's a great movie, dude. Literally,
It's a good one, man.
The animal scene is
Mhm.
one of the most epic because if you went to high school in what I would imagine anywhere USA, like you
What
can
sound did I
empathize.
just-
This is, I don't know. I went. You said Weird Wednesday, and I went whoop 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 whoop. whoop. It's weird. You got this experience. Like there's so much that you can empathize with. Obviously,
Mhm.
like there's a lot that's over the top.
Yeah.
But also like right now, like I don't remember my guidance counselors trying as hard as like Tina Fey does.
Sure.
But now as a teacher, I'm watching these guidance counselors try as hard as she does. Like they're and you know what? They got their work cut out for them.
Yeah.
Like when a kid like comes to me with a problem, I'm like, you know what? I got like 30 kids sitting in the classroom. Why don't you just go down to guidance. Like I throw them under the
Go
bus
down
all the
to
time. It's like, I'm so sorry you're having your third period this month. Like I don't know what to tell you. Just go down to guidance. Like what do you say to that?
I don't know.
So
I don't know.
like anytime a girl asks me to go in there, it's just like, here you go. I know. You don't have to explain. Any guy that asks me to go to nurse, I ask him why every time.
You give them all kinds of questions.
Oh yeah.
Give them the third degree.
Yep. I'm gonna write this time. You better be back in 5 minutes. But a girl asks, like, don't.
Whatever.
I got a pretty good guess. Anyway, we got way off topic.
So what tonight we're talking about is I wanted to do sort of a wrap up retrospective on Italian horror movies.
For sure.
Again, I think that we've been very clear about this. This is still a very new thing for us.
Yeah.
We still have only watched 5.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And
so it's still a small sample size.
And I feel like it's one of those things where, like, even when we started,
Mhm.
we watched our first Italian last year about this time, right?
Yep.
And it felt like, we've seen this before. And actually, what we really had seen was like inspiration from these,
Right.
And so, like, even when we talked about like, okay, we're gonna do a wrap episode. And I was thinking like, I have plenty to talk about. And really it's like, well, I have plenty from like inspired by.
You're right.
And and still it all still like applies, but also we'll get into this. There's a lot of similarities. Like there's just, if you watch an Italian horror film, I don't want to say seen one, seen them all, but
Right.
there's a lot, and same with
Yeah.
slashers, same with, but like there's just a lot of the same.
Yep.
In a good way and in a bad way. So
Yeah, so I do have a little bit of history. I have done some research. This isn't going to be all conjecture and opinions here.
beautiful.
We will get to those in a little bit. So basically, there were Italian cinema kind of started basically the same way American cinema did. And we did some research on the history of horror back when we started doing Decades episodes last year.
Yep. And
we never went back as far as like the earliest found recordings of American horror movies. It's just, that's really, really early cinema. It's stuff that's kind of difficult to find. And
even harder to watch.
yes,
sometimes.
Just, yeah. I mean, you can say it's because we're not cultured enough or whatever. I mean,
I'm not.
that's fine. We're
Have
we're
you
a couple
listened to
middle class dudes from the Midwest.
Have you listened to this show? Yeah, probably.
So yeah,
I didn't like that one stupid movie with what's his face that Alex loved about the art. Like, yeah, I know I'm not cultured.
all the buzzsaw.
Yeah, there it is.
So I did kind of, Italian horror kind of started the same way very early on. I think the first surviving recordings like 1907 or something crazy like that. And like, but essentially once Mussolini comes into power and is elected as prime minister, no horror movies in Italy.
Because the horror was in reality.
He had a very tight handle on the Italian film industry.
That's so strange.
And he basically would only allow movies to be made that were like happy. It was all like happy, beautiful, perfect couples in Italy, and it's so romantic and just wonderful, and
like not overt propaganda films.
Yep. That was the only story that filmmakers were allowed to tell.
Doesn't surprise me, but that's weird. I feel like of all of the propaganda options,
right,
that is the most long played. It's like,
for sure.
Hey, we're gonna start, and in 20 years, our people are gonna feel real happy.
Yeah.
Also, they're gonna have to go to the movies once a week. Like, if they're waiting on my mom to go see an Italian happy film, good luck. It's weird.
So that was kind of an interesting thing that I discovered, and then even
that is super interesting, by the way, though. Like, because like obviously a lot of us know what Mussolini was tied up in, kind of near the end of his realm, but like I'm sure that was a very long played card. We joke about that, but I'm sure it is. Like, it's really strange.
Well, I mean, that's like the power of fascism.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Oh, absolutely.
And so once we finally see fascism fall in Italy, it still takes a while before no one wants to be the first person, to like break that ground.
Definitely not.
But eventually in 1960, so we're still talking like 20 years or so.
Nobody can make a happy one because World War II, so they just don't make movies. No, I'm just kidding.
That's whenever we get Mario Bava's Black Sunday.
Interesting.
And that Mario Bava was able to essentially create the Italian horror trope with one film.
Wow.
And we haven't seen Black Sunday, but essentially, like, it's kind of a culty witch burning type movie.
I'm in.
And yeah, it goes there. There's blood, there's gore. It doesn't get to the extreme amounts of gore like we saw on The Beyond. That comes much later.
Sure.
But it introduces all of that in one fell swoop. And it also created the Italian horror style, which puts an emphasis on visuals and will sacrifice narrative for a mood.
Yes. Which you could argue is filmmaking of the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like the thing about Italian horror is like a lot of times the same way I feel about watching something like Deer Hunter, which is like Scorsese films.
Right.
Which it's like we are going to the dialogue. We're going to purposely stop the dialogue
Mhm.
so we can look at this specific color palette of trees with
Yeah.
an animal running through it, and like it makes you feel things.
Mhm.
Not really sure how it adds to the movie, but it definitely elicits emotions.
Right,
It's
right.
real interesting.
So they have this concept in Italian filmmaking, and I'm gonna mess it up, but I'm gonna do my best. I believe it's pronounced filone,
Okay.
and it roughly translates to "in the tradition of."
Oh, interesting.
And whereas American movies, especially horror movies, are made for plot or characters, even more so characters. We love characters in American horror movies.
Oh yeah, we do.
We want Freddy Krueger. We want Michael Myers. We want to create a character that people are either afraid of or they connect with. Either way, they're craving more of it.
Yeah.
And we want them be able to make a bunch of sequels and make a bunch of money. That's what we do in America.
Same reason why there's a new Child's Play with a Chucky doll.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yep.
Like that could have been. We've talked about this many times. Where this could have been anything, and it could have been really, really good.
It might have been better if it was a brand new IP.
Yeah.
And instead, it's a Chucky thing.
No, we
Like,
need this. We need this thing. We need this character. We need
Yep.
this villain, or we need this hero. We need
Yep. So basically, the way that they set up their films and like this tradition of Filone is that like they will even go as far as to basically like shot for shot plagiarize other movies to where it happens in the exact same way, but it's a completely different setting, completely different film, because they are doing it in the tradition of a movie that they worked on 20 years ago or something like that. And so that's why all of the Italian movie sequels, it's like, how the fuck is this even a sequel? Like,
Yeah.
in our minds, sequels have to be connected either through narrative or character.
Yeah.
And in the Italian mind, Italian horror director mind, sequels are connected by being in the same tradition.
Weird.
So when you think of Demons and Demons 2 and the fact that
Yep.
there are some of the same actors from
Oh, yeah.
Demons in Demons 2,
Yeah.
that is the sequel because it's made in the same tradition. It's made in the same style. Like we're calling back to this previous movie, and that makes it a sequel.
Instead of this guy being a pimp, he is a I don't know,
He
workout
could be anything.
instructor.
Right,
or-
exactly.
Like that was the specific event in
Yeah.
Demons 2.
Which is kind of
wild.
it's kind of like
TikTok. I mean, like, think about it, right? I mean, like,
well, I was thinking
Oh,
more
that's not what you're gonna say.
something a bit more cultured.
I'm just
I was
saying,
gonna
like-
say it's Shakespeare, it's theater.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Like we're getting these.
That makes a lot more sense.
We're getting-
This is why. I'm not cultured.
We're getting these groups of actors and directors and writers together, and we're doing something that isn't the exact same thing that it was before, but it's in the same mood, the same vibe.
But you see where I was going with the TikTok thing.
No, I don't. You can explain it if you
okay,
like.
so like the thing behind TikTok. I'm not really on TikTok, but one of the reasons why I'm so confused is like I hear the same audio file,
Oh, right,
and they're like
right.
recreating their own new scene with the same thing, or
Yeah.
they're recreating this event happening just in their own
Right.
storytelling
And like
technique.
it's fun to jump in on the trend and do
Right.
your version of the same thing everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
But then it's even more like interesting whenever you take the trend and you turn it upside down.
Yes.
I saw one the other day that did that, and it was actually really good, but I'm not gonna remember it. I should have
so-
wrote it down.
so
I didn't
you-
think it would come up.
But
Like I said in the last episode, this is why it's live. Sometimes I don't remember shit, guys. Like this is how we do it.
this is Weird Wednesday
So moving on from that, and that kind of sets the stage really.
for sure.
And that gives us the kind of understanding. And then we have Argento comes along, and as well as Bava and Fulci, they really kind of kickstart that giallo genre that we've kind of talked about before. And the one big giallo that we watched was Deep Red.
Yep.
You can catch that. It's in our first season episodes. It's the Decades episode for the 70s.
Yep.
And that was all kind of based off of these paperbacks that were printed at the time, paperback novels, mystery novels that were all like kind of creepy crime thriller things. Kind of like over here, we might have had like, God, I can't think of anyone from the period. I'm just thinking like Agatha Christie and
That's literally what I was going to say.
Right.
Agatha Christie.
those classic 70s paperbacks. Like,
Yeah.
and they had a lot of them were Italian translations of American authors,
Oh.
but then kind of Italian authors also kind of jumped in, and they all had yellow covers. They all looked exactly the same. And then whenever they started making movies kind of based on that mood, they're not even necessarily based on the books. That's what we would have done in America.
Yeah.
In America, we would have went to that novel. We would have went to that authors and bought the rights and made that book into a movie.
Yeah.
And around the same time period, that's where you get like what's his name? Robert Wise, who did The Haunting, which is based off of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Like, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
We go find the IP, we buy it, and then we adapt it.
Yeah.
Instead, they just say, "Oh, I'm not going to pay anyone because copyright's not really a thing in Italy, and we're just going to do something with that vibe, and like that's good enough."
You can't copyright my mood, bro.
And so that's when we get the Giallos, and then shortly after that, we have a section of movies that we haven't delved into yet.
Okay.
And these were they're called Mondo films.
Oh, I've heard of Mondo films.
Shockumentaries. Also, I mean, those are kind of the two biggest things that we're going to call them. But this is like what leads us to something like Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
Where like it's kind of this mix. They call it shockumentary because like it'll be presented kind of in a documentary format, and like some of it might actually be documentary, but then also there are parts that are staged, and so like it just creates this weird thing. And then eventually you get Cannibal Holocaust, which is a full-on like fictional film, but it doesn't look or feel that way.
Yeah, well, and like for Mondo horror, like specifically the big, I think if I'm remembering Mondo correctly, it's like the big theory that there's some of them that are real.
Absolutely.
And you don't know. And like there's no confirmed cases, but there's also none that
we didn't really
like,
get that in America until like the 80s with like the Faces of Death tapes.
Yeah.
Which I actually have a couple of. I don't think they're on the wall. They might be. If you see it somewhere, point it out. But yeah, and it's basically what they did. I forget what the first one was called. It was called like Mondo something, and it kind of kickstarted everything being Mondo because everything in Italian is in the tradition of.
Sure.
And so they like presented this movie as a documentary, educational film about all these different rituals and things across the world, and was doing that, saying that it was done in an educational way and it's all true, allowed them to get away with showing like actual animal cruelty and sexual things that they wouldn't have been able to show, and like all of this crazy shit.
It gets weird, man.
It gets weird. It gets weird. But then it kind of comes back a little bit, because not too long after that, this is another interesting thing just about the history of Italy that I don't know because I don't live there. I don't really have any kind of connection to there. So there's just things that I don't really relate to. Like the Mussolini says no horror for like 30 years. Like I can't relate to that.
Can you imagine like in the United States, it would drive horror. Like people would be like,
right.
Screw you. We're making it all.
So after Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist comes out in America, it has a huge impact on Italian filmmakers because of the people of Italy's relationship with the Catholic Church.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So up until this point, really broaching that topic of like making horror movies that have anything religious in them it's not that it was like taboo. It's just like not even something that would have come to their mind.
Right.
It's like that's just not even a thing that we do. We'll go and we'll make these cannibal movies where it's about white people who go to this island and then, get fucked up, which is basically what Zombie was.
Right.
Zombie came after kind of that big Italian cannibal movie like boom.
Okay.
And so what they did is they took the type of movie they already knew how to make, which was this white outsiders go to a
indigenous people,
tribal, not as advanced place and get fucked. Like they did that and they said it was the sequel to Dawn of the Dead. Like that's literally what happened.
I feel the same mood.
It's just a zombie
Sequel.
now instead of like actual live cannibals running around.
Yes.
It gives them an excuse to make them look gross.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
So after we get Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist, we have this whole kind of era of Italian movies that we haven't really touched on much, where they basically just become obsessed with possession
Ooh.
and what they called nunsploitation movies,
Ooh.
of just like nuns doing bad things and like being like brutal and evil and gross. And a couple of examples of that are Beyond the Door and The Antichrist, and it just
I've seen The Antichrist.
it just blew up.
Ooh. It's intense. I mean, like, so what's really interesting? So, we're actually talking about the rise of the Catholic Church in my history class right now.
Oh, okay.
And what's so strange about this idea in America, in Western philosophy, even though this is in Western Europe,
Right.
but especially in this democratic state, is like we really don't understand the idea of marriage between church and state.
It's true.
And so, like, what you got to remember is, like, the Catholic Church, man, like, they are the state.
Well, and,
Like,
if you think about it, like,
Woo.
post Mussolini, like after the fall of fascism, the people, I'm sure, even held even closer to that. It's
Sure.
like, oh, well, the church won't corrupt the way that our prime minister corrupted.
Sure.
Like, and so they probably leaned into it even more heavily.
Oh,
And so, yeah, I mean, we have tons of conversations in America about separation between church and state. And from my reading and just, I'll say it, lack of understanding and knowledge of
Sure.
that time period in a place before I was born, completely across the other side of the world, like, I just don't think about or don't even really know. Like, that's true. That's why we wanted separation
This
of
is
church and
why.
state. It's because all of the shit that was happening in Europe before people left. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, the easiest explanation is like, King of England can't divorce. 'Cause
Right.
The Pope won't let him. I'm going to start Protestantism.
right.
Wait, what? Like, none of this makes sense.
Yeah.
But like that's the reality. I mean, like the church spread its influence by buying land and
Yeah.
like creating its own papal empire. Like,
Mhm.
it's really interesting. But I've seen the Antichrist. And like there's some intensity there.
Yeah.
Like almost like, and like I certainly don't want to project this onto any Italian directors. Like, I don't know.
Sure.
I'm not delving into ignorant situations, but like when you are doing something for the first time, you
Right.
can feel the passion, right? Like when you smoked your first cigarette, when you drank your first beer, when you like do these things for the first time, it brings energy, and you can
Yeah.
feel that through that movie. Like, it's
Mhm.
interesting that I didn't know that about it,
Yeah.
but like you can, it has the same intensity of like The Exorcist, which
Mhm.
is really hard to recreate.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, even once you get down the Exorcist line, like, we have to get crazier and we got to get spookier and people
Mhm.
got to crawl on ceilings and like
Right.
backs got to break 100 different times.
Yep.
And like, but the Antichrist, like, it has that energy. It has that fire of like, we are doing this for the first time and we're scared to make this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
So, with all that being said, a very short primer on the history of Italian horror. Just kind of what are some of your thoughts? So, coming out of this, you know, like I said, up until now we've seen 5. The last 3 weeks we've watched a different
Yeah.
Italian horror movie. All, even though the last 2 were the same director, they all kind of fall into very different types of movies.
Yeah.
Although they're all still Italian horror movies. So yeah, just kind of what's your takeaway? What's your retrospective on what we've seen so far?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's kind of like so many things, like so many subgenres that we talk about. It's better to know what you're getting into.
Right.
It's better to anticipate a foreign subtitle film. It's better
Sure.
to anticipate, you know, a found footage film.
Mhm.
And this, I would say, it falls into that category because you're going to get a lot of a movie that doesn't feel like a horror movie.
Yep.
You're going to get a lot of a movie that is trying to inflict that they want you to emote more than drive a plot.
Right.
Sometimes it could feel more like almost a soap opera.
Yeah.
Where they're hitting you with good camera angles and that nice weird soundtrack. Like, there's always the soundtrack, to me, being probably just American. Like it never really feels like it fits.
Right.
But you come to appreciate it,
There's something really interesting about it. Yeah.
and it becomes endearing.
Yeah.
Where like the first time it hits you, and you're like, "What is happening? This doesn't fit at all."
Mhm.
And then like the last few weeks, like you feel it, it's coming. Like,
Right.
oh, it hasn't happened yet. There was one week where our sound wasn't working, and James was like, "Oh no, by this point, we should have some crazy Italian music." Like, it's true. And but it also is going to have that drive of where like it has this weird mix of like you feel like you have to pay attention, but not always.
Yeah.
And I do really enjoy it. But it's very specific.
Right.
And it was, I will say, I feel like, I don't know. This is just kind of we've only seen 5, but I
Mhm.
feel like maybe we got lucky with the ones that we watched, because I could see how I wouldn't want to watch 2 months of them.
Right.
Like we watched a couple weeks. They were all pretty good. They were all pretty decent films, pretty different films.
Yep.
But it's not a subgenre. Like I can sit down and watch Exorcist movies. Like I
Yeah.
can sit down and watch the paranormal. I don't think I could do that with this.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and we still actually haven't watched the kind of big capstone that most people would say is like the first Italian horror movie you're supposed to watch, which is Suspiria.
sure. And that's and I think even like Black Sunday, like maybe if we got I think that, like maybe if I started to really delve into what these origins are, because so many times it feels like you're watching the same movie.
Right.
We watched Demons, and we watched the Joe Bob Briggs special of Demons,
Mhm.
which was a very I don't know, like especially his relationship with that movie
Yeah.
is very interesting. But then we watched Demons 2, and it's like, okay, this is the same movie.
Yeah.
I don't, and so it's I think maybe getting to that origin, obviously some backstory, but also that even further kind of drives that point of like, know what you're getting into.
Yep.
Because now when I go back and watch some of these, or when I watch some new ones, I'm going to understand like what they're trying to do, what they're trying
Sure.
to emulate, what they're trying to kind of recreate. And there's something mastery about that, right? Where
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm striving for this, and if I get there, I've achieved something.
Yeah.
But also,
And I would say that there are other genres that I really like that I could say the same thing about, or
documentaries.
at least
I mean-
directors, documentaries. I was like thinking, I feel like Romero and Italian horror like are very, very close cousins.
Oh, sure.
And like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
love Romero's of the Dead movies. I've said it so many times on the show, but like, if you're not in the right mood, like it can feel slow.
Yeah.
It can feel a little laggy. It can feel a little boring. And then it's just like absolute chaos in the last 20 minutes.
Yep.
Like, yeah, that's kind of what they are though.
And honestly, when you get into like, I mean, even when you start getting it, so I kind of jumped the gun with documentaries, but like
Yeah.
Ken Burns, everybody looks at Ken Burns and says like, that's how you make a documentary.
Right.
And so many people try to recreate it. Can they do it? Do they do it? But even like getting into this idea of like inspiration, like the guys, I'm trying to remember who the director was of the Blues Brothers film.
Mm.
And he even credited like, oh, I really love that Romero style.
Yeah.
Where like all of a sudden we're ramping cars at the end, and it's like
Right.
it kind of hits that chaos point. So like it's once you understand what we're driving at
Mm-hmm.
and kind of what the aim is, I think it gives it more. I don't know. I don't want to say more bearable, because they're still really good films, but
Right.
it makes you feel like an insider
Yeah.
versus am I missing something?
Right. Especially since you weren't here for last week, I would be interested to hear kind of your thoughts on, you don't have to like go through every single one, but just
Sure.
of the 5 movies that we've watched, like what were standouts to you? Like what was your favorite? Things like that.
Yeah. So I will say, I know Joe Bob gives it a really hard time. I
Mhm.
really did like Demons.
Yeah, you like that one a lot.
I thought it was really entertaining. I thought anything that kind of gives me that new life, new take energy, kind of like what I was talking about, where like this feels different. This and
Yeah.
like, and maybe it's because I haven't seen Black Sunday, and maybe it's because I haven't seen Suspiria. Like I don't
Mhm.
know how close they get to this.
Well, I think Demons also it fits the Italian mold of kind of like a series of small vignettes that are held together by a loose plot, but it also fits that just like this is stupid fun
Yeah.
type of horror movie. Like
Yeah.
this is a great, what would have been at the time a great drive-in, like kind of mindless, like even no one's actually getting scared by this. It's borderline horror comedy, even if they didn't make it to be funny. And you can have so much fun with movies like that.
Absolutely. A lot of great one-liners, a lot of great kills.
I mean, you get a guy driving a dirt bike through
a
movie theater,
absolutely.
slashing demons with a katana. Like, it's not just a sword. It's like strictly a katana. Like, what the fuck is happening?
I did forget about that scene. That's true. Oh my gosh, there's so much about Demons. And I would say Demons 2 is, now that I understand like that idea,
right,
it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I think if I went into Demons 2 knowing that, of like, hey, we're going to kind of make the same thing, but we're going to rearrange some of the imagery.
Right.
It would have made it.
It has its own brand of craziness.
It does.
It's not as good.
It's not as good.
I can for sure attest to that.
Yeah. I did like Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really entertaining, and I really liked The Beyond.
Man.
You know, but you do get, like, especially with Zombie, you get that this is almost a soap opera.
Yep.
Where like there are certainly horror elements, but and when they come, the imagery is good.
Yeah.
But also just the different camera angles, the different like drama that they try to put in the plot drives that like kind of over the top, like zoom in.
The
like,
zoom ins, man.
And or
if there's anything that I really learned about Italian filmmakers, it's they love that dramatic zoom in.
I will also say though, like so many times that we get what I would consider what's it called? It's the exposition, like the
exposition through dialogue.
Like this happens a lot, especially in horror films, especially when they clearly get to the end and they don't know how to wrap it up in the next 20 minutes. Like we gotta, and like I feel like instead of having a lot of that through our Italian horror, we get a lot of those camera angles. We're like, hey, instead of telling you, we're just going to show you what I see.
Yeah.
And like if you miss that scene, and like we had some of those examples. I went and used the restroom and like somebody had to tell me like, oh, you missed a camera shot to this thing, which gave some answers. So like it's interesting. It also cuts out some of that dialogue. It still elicits that mood that like, oh, I still know what's happening. I will say, what was it? Deep Red.
Yeah.
I really liked.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because it was the first, because we were doing, I also really loved our decades.
It's also the only giallo. Like, none of the other Italian movies that we watched have been giallo at all.
Yeah.
So,
I would say like of all the ones we watched, Demons, because of the Joe Bob commentary, was special, but Deep Red was really good.
Cool.
In my mind.
Yeah.
But it was and I remember specifically going through decades, and we had talked so much about like 90s, 80s, like we're at that point we were working backwards. And it felt like we were hitting everything that we were saying.
Right.
And like Deep Red was just like that kind of that. I just distinctly remember like it's different, it's new. It's something that we hadn't really experienced before, where we were kind of working back through of like, oh, this was the inspiration to this. We can kind of predict. We lived through this experience. We lived through this. And like, it was something that was, to me, completely new.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
That's cool, man.
Boom.
I don't know if you listened. So the episode for the Beyond went up just today.
I have not gotten to listen to it yet.
All I'll say is Danny and I ended up really liking the Beyond.
Yeah.
And I would, like I say in the episode, if you already listened to it, if you haven't, sorry, whatever. About 2/3. So I mean, the second act.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't like this movie, and I'm giving it a low score.
Yeah.
And then by the time the third act hits, I'm like, my score was thumbs up 80%.
I think we all in that viewership, we all had that experience. Like, and I know, like, I haven't listened to the episode yet.
Yep.
I don't know what Danny would say. Maybe he said like, oh, I was riding the whole time.
Right.
To me, I had the same experience. I don't know if my low point lasted quite as long, but it was just like, okay, same thing, this, that, like, okay, this was cool the first time you did it. We haven't done anything. It was good. It was really good.
I really like it. That's one that I'll actually watch it again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
watch so many movies that we review that like most of them I have little to no interest in watching a second time.
Mhm.
But like I will watch The Beyond again for
Absolutely.
sure. The Demons I will watch again.
Yeah.
If for nothing else, like invite people over who don't really like horror movies around Halloween and like, oh, you got to watch something spooky. Let's watch this crazy Demons movie in a movie theater.
Crazy Demons movie. Absolutely.
So yeah.
Dude, I feel like especially knowing that things like in The Beyond. The Beyond?
The Beyond.
Okay, yeah, just I didn't feel right giving it a preposition there. Like ideas like they were blind wearing those contacts. Like,
Right.
I mean, like especially like knowing that. I think you mentioned that like halfway through the film, and it was like,
Mhm.
wow, I'm watching this completely different because she just navigated all the way out of the house. Good for her. You know, like it's
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just interesting stuff like that where like, as you are. I don't know. But that's the kind of stuff that like, especially where I'm finding is like now I have like with some of this backstory, I want to go back and watch some of these things again,
Yeah.
or I want to continue to branch out. Whereas like I feel like that's the point of this episode is like, hey,
Mhm.
be warned if you don't know this information.
Sure. Yeah.
You may watch the same movie 5 times with 5 different titles, and you're like, why can't? Is this it? Is this what Italian horror is? I'm stuck.
You know
gotta get
what?
out.
And like there's something to be said of developing a palate for something that's different. I
Yep.
mean, we're both pretty avid beer drinkers. I have been on a huge hops kick lately. I spent most of my beer drinking life hating anything hoppy or IPA-y
It's true.
at all.
I mean, I don't know your whole beer drinking
Yeah.
life, but for the most of time when I've known you,
Yeah.
it's like, I'm not interested.
Yeah, now I can't stop and I hate it because I feel like I'm like a walking white hipster cliche and it pisses me off.
Yep.
But like I can't get enough of bitter beers. And like I think that sometimes movies can be very similar, especially when
Yep.
it's something like these Italian movies that are so different. If you grew up completely sheltered from anything like this before, you're going to be like, wait, why doesn't their mouth match what's coming out of the speakers?
Yeah.
Like even things like that can be extremely confusing and off-putting.
Yeah.
But like once you've been in it for a little bit and you can kind of develop your taste for it,
Yeah.
and maybe you end up just saying it's totally not for you, but like I don't know, if nothing else, like I'm still more intrigued. I still want to do more. Obviously, we've been in it for a while now, so I'm looking for a break.
Yeah. Well, and I'll
Um,
say like even the imagery, like it's just like the
Yeah.
imagery is different, and like it helps you, if nothing else, like cleanse that palate a little bit. Like
Mhm.
like when they go for like those, I'm gonna poke out of the eyeball shots, like they're just better.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
they just
for
are.
for the time period, they were 100% just better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we didn't really get into it, but like Italian horror today isn't really a thing anymore.
Yeah.
I think the last big Italian horror movie came out in like 2007. And even then,
Interesting.
before that, it was like the 80s because like they kept a lot of their stuff. They did try to sequelize, and like Zombie goes up to 4 or 5 parts, I
Oh.
think. And by then, like they just couldn't keep up with American production value,
Right.
because even if their effects were so much better at the time, now in America there's way more money in the system, and
Yeah.
slashers blew up and we were pouring all kinds of money into special effects that like they just couldn't compete.
Yeah.
So it kind of just petered off and kind of died, and so there's
That's
not really
crazy.
much that they're doing over there anymore.
What was it? I know this is really putting you
Mhm.
on the spot. Do you remember that movie in 2007? Like I was trying
I
to
don't know the
think-
name of it.
I was trying to think, like, have we watched a recent Italian horror film?
We have
so that makes sense. Like,
Yep.
if that's the most recent,
Yeah.
like, no, we
Yeah, and
haven't.
I'm sure that there's like indie stuff that's come out,
Oh,
but
sure.
obviously that's probably almost impossible for us to even get our hands on over here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've seen kind of a turn, and obviously America's always been pretty big in the movie production community. But then like any other kind of international films that we've watched have been Spanish, German, obviously Asian. That's a whole nother series that we'll probably get into next season of Asian horror movies.
Let's go. I am in. We had that one Swedish. I think it was Swedish, Danish.
Swedish, I do believe.
I was thinking of the Rift specifically.
It was Rift, yeah, and it's not a horror movie, and we were tricked into watching it by Voodoo. It's not a horror movie. It's It's fine.
It's fine.
It's not a horror movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that if nothing else, it puts me in a place where like I'm even more open to it now than I think that I was. And even after watching Deep Red, and then I watched another Argento Giallo called I think it's pronounced Tenebrae or something like that.
Okay.
And that one I didn't really buy into as much because I had just watched Deep Red, and that was supposed to be his kind of like greatest hits of Giallo, and then I watched another one of his Giallos, and it's like, oh yeah, well, like this is not as good as Deep Red, so why would I watch this movie? I just watched Deep Red. But that's before I'd even developed the palate for it, and like now I think I could even revisit it and have a completely different experience than I did the first time. And yeah, I think that it's a genre that still has a lot of different flavors within it, even though they all have things that are similar.
Yeah.
Because the Beyond is not demons.
Yes.
Deep Red is not demons. Deep Red is not the Beyond. They probably are a little bit closer than they are to demons, but like they're still very different.
Very different.
Even though there are these like things that are kind of the same.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that it's a pretty nuanced genre, and I'm still super interested in doing some more of those, you know, throughout our time on the night shift, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do anything on the night shift.
Hey, you got anything else you want to say about Italian horror movies?
I don't. I feel like we've kind of covered it all.
Yep.
And again, like just going back to like, if you've never delved into this, which we were noobs about this time a year ago.
Yep.
It's like just be ready,
Noobleicious.
just stay open. You know, I mean, Deep Red. A lot of people may say like that was like more of a what am I looking for? Like a horror, not even horror, like almost Seven-ish,
Right.
like the movie Seven, like where it's like, yes, it has horror elements, but it's more like a thriller detective movie. And like, yeah, it is, but also like start picking up on those nuances of the camera angles, the music, the almost the panic, those moods that they're trying to elicit you to.
Yeah.
Like that's good. Like I didn't know that like, you know, if you've watched 70s movies, you know that they're trying to go after the mood, not the dialogue, not the plot. But like, okay, but that doesn't necessarily apply to Italian horror. You know what I mean? Like different place, different time, different. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, now that you know these things, like stay open, give it a shot, give it a couple.
All right. I got before we go, I have a couple slash card questions for you.
Oh god.
So for Christmas, I got this board game.
I'm ready.
It's just a trivia game called Slash Cards. And it's all horror movie trivia. I don't know where the box is.
You look back here, so I was looking.
I thought it was behind you somewhere. I don't know. I can't remember. It's around here somewhere. I just pulled out a few cards. Anyway, so I wanted to end with a couple of these. And if you get one right, I might keep going.
Okay.
But if you get one wrong, we're done.
Oh no!
I'm gonna softball you the first one.
Okay.
In Halloween 1978, you got this.
Okay. This puts pressure because I love Halloween. I've seen it like 100 times.
What does Laurie Strode use to stab Michael Myers in the eye when he breaks into the closet where she is hiding?
She gets in with the hanger.
A clothes hanger.
Yes!
You got it.
That was an easy one. You're right. That was
I think you'll be fine on the next one too.
Oh, don't say that.
A teenager has a premonition of his death and escapes the plane crash that kills most of his class. Now he and his surviving classmates must avoid death, which is intent on finishing what it started in this 2000 film.
Final Destination.
There it is.
Which gets a lot of crap, but I'm just going to go ahead and get on my Weird Wednesday. I know you play out a trope too much, and it just
we're gonna
gets
have
old.
to do like a Final Destination episode because
this is one of those things.
I
man,
like the first one. I like the second one.
I'm certainly not arguing for the whole series.
Right.
I am not arguing for the whole series, but like this is one where people are gonna call in and be like, "I got to talk to that guy because that movie sucks."
It's our age. It's our age.
Yeah,
if you are
yeah.
if you're any older than us or any younger than us, you probably think Final Destination is stupid.
Yeah.
It was like it just hit at the perfect time for our age group.
And I think it was kind of one of those movies that kind of walked the line of like my very conservative parents. Like when I told them like, "Oh, I'm watching Final Destination. Oh, what's that about? What's a couple kids escaping death?" Like, okay,
right,
doesn't sound too bad. Anyway,
all right, this is the one that I think that'll get you on.
Oh no.
What is the name of the haunted inn in Ty West's The Innkeepers?
Oh,
I know, right? I argue for this movie so much.
The Pink Flamingo? no, I think that's the in Home Alone 2 when they go to Florida. I was just picturing in my mind. I can't unlive that one. Shoot.
The Yankee Peddler.
Dang it. That's where we stop.
And that wraps it up for Slash Cards.
I can't even defend myself. Somebody watch Home Alone 2. Tell me if I'm right. I'm pretty sure I am.
You're going to watch it again. Why are you telling someone else to watch it?
I don't know. I'm going to go home tonight and watch it.
All right. Well, that about does it for us here at the Night Shift. Kind of wrapping up our thoughts on Italian horror movies. They're good. They're good. It's a good subgenre. It deserves to be its own subgenre.
Yes.
And you know what? I'm really interested in learning more and watching more, continuing down that path. But we're going to start doing some different things just to keep it fresh around here.
Love it.
But yeah, I'm stoked about it. And you know what? Maybe that's just me. But for Night Shift Video, I am James, and this is...
I'm Cody.
And we're just saying, thanks for stopping in.